I'm Claire Edwards, and you're listening to Authentic Leadership, a series of conversations, insights and inspirations with leaders who are real, raw and authentic. Today I bring you a real conversation with Stella Collins, learning expert and co-founder of Stella Labs. I say real conversation because this is probably the most conversational podcast I've engaged in. Stella has an insatiable curiosity for everything. It's shaped both her career and life and continues to be a guiding skill in her decisions and directions. Our conversation begins with Stella sharing how curiosity took her into the world of IT and later training, a function she didn't really want. Enjoy our podcast on leading with curiosity. In 2015, I moved back from Australia to the UK for a couple of years, and that's where I met Stella Collins. Now, Stella was already building a worldwide reputation as an expert in brain-friendly learning, and as soon as her book was published, I devoured it. It's called Neuroscience for Learning and Development. And I was also a regular attendee at Stella's experiential brain-friendly learning groups. And a trait that I noticed and actually really admired in Stella, whenever I was interacting with her, was around curiosity. And that is the subject of our podcast today. Now, curiosity seems to be a theme rippling through Stella's work and life, and I'm sure we'll be exploring that more in the next 45 minutes or so. And I'm really curious, pardon the pun, to be in conversation with Stella today and really explore the role that curiosity has taken in shaping her career and life to date. So Stella, welcome to Authentic Leadership.
Thank you very much, Claire. It's really lovely to have another conversation with you. I always enjoy
it. Same here, absolutely. And just actually, when we first met, I knew straight away that you were from Liverpool, even though you do have a subtle accent, and we sort of became kindred spirits. So before we sort of delve into the topic of curiosity, can you share a little bit about your early career to set the scene and the path that took you away from Liverpool?
Well, first of all, I'm going to tell you I'm not actually from Liverpool. I'm from across the water on the Wirral. So yes. I do have that slight twang, and I definitely, picked it up in your voice, but I am actually from the Wirral. So, but, I've been to Liverpool many times, though not in the last 20 years.
I'm so glad you said that, because people who come through, and I hope this gets understood in the podcast, certainly by English people. People who are from the Wirral and say they're from Liverpool get challenged by us people from the other side of the water saying, oh, no, you're not.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not from Liverpool. I'm definitely from the Wirral, which is just, for anyone who doesn't know, is a little peninsula across the River Mersey.
I'm going to stop there a second, Stella.
Yeah.
You're popping.
I'm popping.
Popping, yeah. I don't know if it's your microphone or if you can turn your volume down a little bit on the mic or something like that, but it's
let me try turning the volume down on the mic. Oh God, come back. That's not what I want. Come on. Do you know how I turn the volume down on the mic?
No.
I would have thought that.
Is it a headset mic?
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe move it a tiny little bit further down or something.
Does that
from your mouth?
Is that any better?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I had it too close. Thank you very much.
Okay, so that's all fine, because then you can, I'll edit all of this out. So the question was, can you share a little bit of your early career and the path that took you away from Liverpool?
Do you want me still to talk about I don't come from Liverpool?
No, that's fine. I'll keep that in.
Okay.
But that you haven't been back for 20 years or so or something like that. Oh, no, just answer the question. Can you share a little of your early career and path that took you away from Liverpool?
Okay. Yeah, certainly. Well, I first kind of moved away when I went to Sheffield University, where I studied psychology, which has kind of been one of my life passions ever since I discovered it. And at that time, psychology was considered a bit of a weird thing to study, but I absolutely loved it. It was so interesting. And then I moved to London and studied human communication, which again was really, really fascinating. So, I have this passion for people and understanding them and a curiosity about, why people do things and why they behave like they do. So that curiosity started, well, it didn't start there. No, it did start really, really early when I was young, but I'll come back to that later, perhaps.
Now you've got me curious. I want to know about it, but do you think it would fit better later on?
Possibly. Yeah. Well, I mean, basically, I've just always been curious. My mum used to get driven mad because I was always asking her why. And she just, in the end, she just took to saying, she would just say, she would try and explain and say, because, and eventually she just took to replying with, why, cause? Because she couldn't answer all my questions.
You must have driven her nuts.
I did. But she was very good. She did always try and find an answer for me, which I think, in terms of curiosity, if you can satisfy a person's curiosity, and we will come to that later, I'm sure, they're more likely to remain curious. So she never stilted or stunted my curiosity, which was fantastic.
Yeah. And from what I know of you, your curiosity doesn't just extend to people. There's a fascination with systems and how things work, and so it's that real balance of people and process. Would you agree?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I am horribly curious. If somebody introduces me to something new, I really do want to know more about it. There are some things that, I've kind of delved and thought, yeah, that's probably not for me, but I always want to know just a little bit more.
And so if you always want to know just a little bit more, is there ever a point that you get to where you know enough?
Oh, no. No, because I think, this all ties into learning as well, doesn't it? That as you learn more, you realize there's even more to learn. So you keep having to go either deeper or wider, and it can be either depending on what it is. But, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
And so what sort of role has curiosity played in your career trajectory? Because I know I have access to a little bit of the background, but you certainly have had a varied career and in varied places.
Indeed. So I guess, I did all this studying around psychology and human communication. And then at that point in the UK, jobs were quite hard to come by. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do with them. I loved them, but I didn't know what to do with them. So as part of my master's, I actually looked at computer aids for people with speech disability. And up until that point, this is a long time ago when people didn't have computers in their homes. I hadn't really understood the purpose of computers. I was kind of interested in them, but I didn't understand the purpose. And then when I discovered these speech aids, I thought, oh yeah, they've got a real purpose. So at that point, I thought, well, I need to find a job. I need to work. And there were lots of jobs going in IT. So I thought, all right, I'll give IT a go. So I became a programmer. I worked in system support. I was an analyst. At one point, I kind of drifted off into, at the time, what was expert systems, which was kind of a side shoot, I guess, of artificial intelligence. So I was kind of exploring different things within the world of IT. And then I had children, and then that was an amazing, curious experiment to kind of all the things I'd learned at university about child development to start kind of using them as little guinea pigs,
experimenting on your children.
Yeah, absolutely. They seem to have survived that.
I was going to say they've turned out fine.
Yeah, they did.
Please, everybody, it's okay.
I'm extremely proud of my children. Very proud of them. And yeah, so lots of our friends at that time, kind of went to university, and then they kind of did the going abroad for a year, the big OE, as you call it over there in Australia, I think, the overseas experience. But we didn't. We just kind of settled down. We got married. We bought a house. We got married. We had kids. And then when the children were about 2 and 4, actually my sister was very poorly and nearly died. And it just really made me realize how short life is and how you've got to kind of, grasp things, seize the moment. So we kind of said, well, we really fancied doing an overseas experience. Neither of us spoke any other languages at that point. So we thought, well, it's got to be somewhere English speaking. Anyway, we ended up in New Zealand. So we moved to New Zealand for at that point, for an indefinite time. We didn't know how long we'd be there, but we said it had to be longer than 2 years, because if you're only there 2 years, you'd always be thinking about going home.
Yeah.
So that was a great, and again, that was a curiosity about what's it like to live in another country, what's somebody else's culture like. And I absolutely got really fascinated by the Maori culture and the kind of the history of New Zealand. So we lived there for 4 years, at which point we were kind of like, we've kind of explored that sufficiently. Came back to the UK and was still working in IT. But at that point, somebody, I took a job, and the job title was system support and training manager. And I thought, system support, I can do that. That's fine. But I absolutely hated the idea of being involved in training. A, I didn't like standing up in public and speaking, terrified of it. B, all the training I had ever had, being in IT, was mainly really, really dull. And any of the other training I'd had was mostly lecturing. And I thought, well, I just don't want to do that. So I kind of ignored the training job and employed a couple of people. One of whom, when I asked him what did he need to do his job, said a lectern, which when I look back on it now, I just think that's so funny, but that was his first requirement. And I bought him one because I knew nothing.
I'm so glad you're sharing this story. You've never shared this story with me before. And as our listeners will come to know, that you are a worldwide specialist in experiential, brain-friendly learning, bringing learning to life. And you started off thinking, I don't want to be a training manager.
Yeah, quite. However,
the irony is not.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the first purchase I made in training was a lectern.
Oh gosh, sorry, carry on.
No, but the other person I employed was just a star. She was really passionate about learning. She was a very spontaneous kind of trainer, and she really got the whole kind of this is about the people, not about the content stuff. So she began to persuade me that actually, she convinced me that I did have a real interest in learning, as long as it was done well. And she kept inspiring me and saying, Stella, look, this is a really good role for you. All that psychology, everything, this is a great role. So I kind of got, I got curious and I started to investigate more.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I went to CIPD conference at that time. And there were, as still happens, but rather less so, there were a lot of people in grey suits and there was a lot of HR, but there were some learning people there. But again, they were sort of mostly in grey suits. And I was thinking, this isn't inspiring. But there was a massive pirate ship with pirates on it. So I went to talk to them, and they turned out to be a company who specialized in using accelerated learning in the field of finance training. And I thought, well, if you can do that with finance training, then you can clearly do it with IT training. Because at this point, I was thinking, we've got to do something better with IT training.
Yeah.
So I effectively, I kind of jumped ship from the company I was working in and went and joined their ship.
The pirate ship.
The pirate ship. They weren't permanently in a pirate ship, it has to be said.
And what did you do there?
So actually, that was, I do this. I do jump ship occasionally and go and pursue an interest. We started training, and I was working with them. And this is my worst training experience, I can tell you. I was working with them to deliver a program, and I was asked to deliver. I was still a really new trainer, really fresh into it. I was asked to deliver a session on coaching, a very small session, as part of a much bigger leadership program. So we turned up on day. So I didn't really know anything else about the rest of the program. I just learned my bit about the coaching piece. really, I knew it really well. And we got there and the morning started. And at about the morning break, my colleague, who was the senior person who really knew what he was talking about, had a phone call from his wife to say, darling, you're going to have to come home because the baby that's due in 2 months is now on its way. So he just left. And I was left there thinking, okay, so what do I do now? So I tried really hard to struggle through. And if in retrospect, I would have done something entirely different, but I tried really hard to struggle through. The training manager was present at this, quite prestigious training course, and she just she really undermined me. Kept watching and being, rather than taking me aside and saying, "Look, what can we do?" She just made me feel incredibly nervous. So basically, we just stopped the course and waited until the next day when one of my other colleagues turned up, and it was a horrible experience. But it really cemented in me that idea that you just have to go with what the learners need. You don't necessarily need to stick to the content, because if we just opened up the conversation at that point, which I would do now, I'd just say, look, everything's changed. Let's just open up the conversation. What do you need to know? How can we do that together? How can we work together to find answers to what you need? It could have been probably a better experience than one we designed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just hearing that, what I'm hearing is the link between curiosity and flexibility and adaptability. So how do you use your trait of curiosity to jump into that learner's world? And so before we move into curiosity and leadership, I'd actually love to, pardon the pun again, pick your brains around the role of curiosity in learning. It's such an important point, but I would love to hear it from the master.
Well, without it, learning is really difficult. I mean, the first thing in learning is to make learning easy is the person who wants to learn needs to want to learn. And for me, curiosity is, that desire to learn is the starting point of anything. It doesn't matter. In my view, it doesn't matter how much of any of the other really good stuff you do to make sure that, knowledge skills are transferred into the workplace and that you improve your productivity and performance and all those things that make a business or an organization work. If people don't want to learn in the first place, the rest of it won't happen. So you've got to get them feeling curious. You've got to try and tap into their curiosity. And I think you can do that in lots of small ways. So, you can send them things that make them curious. You can maybe keep some things about the program that you're maybe introducing to them, a bit hidden, prompt them with questions, prompt them with mysteries, prompt them with, for instance, on one of our courses, we always say, please bring a hat, but we don't tell them why they're going to bring a hat. We just ask them to bring one. So small things can prompt sufficient curiosity to at least get people starting to think, well, okay, you've obviously got to do lots of stuff beforehand to make sure that the program's right for them and that, that you've selected the right people for the right training and you've designed the program with those people in mind. But that getting the individual curious is for me, that's the key to learning.
So taking the example of the hat, bring a hat, they're reading this on their invitation. What is then going on between their ears when they read that? What's sort of the next step? What's happening?
So that starts them asking questions, why do I need a hat? And for some people that might be, slightly kind of concerning, I haven't got a hat, or which hat do I bring? Does it matter which hat I bring? So they're starting to kind of puzzle over the hat. Some people will think, oh, that sounds like it's going to be a fun course. Lots of people have different reactions to that.
Yeah.
But I think all of them are going to start asking questions as to why the hat. And once you start asking questions, that's how you start to learn, isn't it? That's it's just the essence of it. So, and even if somebody is slightly, and a lot of people are nervous going to training, even if somebody has a slight nervousness, that level of curiosity raises your attention, and it starts to produce dopamine. So that level of dopamine that we get I've just found something really interesting about dopamine and curiosity, actually. Shall I tell you?
Ooh,
Shall I say it
share,
now?
please.
Yeah.
Now.
So curiosity appears to be located in your nucleus accumbens, but so is part of the fear response. And it seems that it's the impact of dopamine on your nucleus accumbens that decides whether you feel curiosity or fear. And off the top of my head, I think
Wow.
I've only just learned this, so I need to get it clear. But I think if the dopamine affects the back of the nucleus accumbens, then I think that feels like fear. And if it affects the front of the nucleus accumbens, if it stimulates there, then I think that feels like curiosity. I could have those two the wrong way around, but
Gosh, but they're two sides of the same coin.
almost, yeah. And you can
And we always thought
understand
that was
that.
just a reward center of the brain. Sorry, yeah. Explain why that makes sense.
Well, if you think about, there's something new. When there's something new, we can either be afraid of it or we can be curious about it. And actually, both those things are true, aren't they? If you see a dark alley, I love, kind of strange little weird streets. But every time I look down a cute little street and I think, I wonder where that goes, there's also that slightly fearful feeling of, well, it might go somewhere awful, or there might be something lurking down it I can't see. Now, usually my curiosity gets the better of me. Unless it's a really dark, scary night, and then it probably wouldn't, But
I was going to say, so your curiosity's giving you a bit of courage.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, it does. It can give you that kind of like, well, I just really want to know. So actually, I'm going to overcome this fear. I'm going to go past this fear and actually go and find out. So yeah, curiosity and courage are actually quite important. I've been talking to an organization about fear of failure and how we can learn from failure. But yeah, people fear failure. But if you can get curious about, well, what happens, if I succeed, or what happens if I fail? If you get curious about it, then and I'm kind of interested in exploring this more. But if you get curious about it, how far can that overcome your fear of failure, or your fear of anything?
Absolutely, because curiosity in itself will. So I suppose it's more of a neutralizer, that we're not labeling so much scary or failure or whatever the negative labels that we can put on things, and
well, I'm not sure it's a neutralizer, Claire, because for me, curiosity is a very strong feeling. So I don't think it's a neutralizer, but I think it's more of a yin and yang, and which one at which point plays the stronger role.
Yeah, but if you've got something that you're currently labeling as very scary, bringing curiosity in will, I suppose, lessen the effect of it. I'm using the word neutralize, but it sort of helps you move along that continuum. You're not yet excited, but you're no longer as fearful.
I think what it might help you do is take the next step to find out a bit more.
Yeah.
And I talked about going to New Zealand, and when we were thinking about going to New Zealand, we talked to lots of people and we're telling them that we're thinking of going. And what we found was that just by telling people, the first step was just saying to people, oh, we're thinking of going to New Zealand. That was like the first step. And that kind of then took us into the next step, which then made us curious about, okay, so how do you get to New Zealand? What do you have to do? And every step you took, there was a new thing to discover, until you suddenly found, well, oh my goodness, we're living in New Zealand. And I guess that curiosity about the next piece kind of helped break down what is a really big project. Let's go and let's move our entire family to an entirely, the other half of the world. But the curiosity kind of broke it down into small pieces, because you couldn't, well, you could be curious about the big picture, but you also had to be curious about every little step along the way, which then enabled you to take that step, because that wasn't a really big, fearful step. That was just, I'm just going to get some information. I'm just going to talk to somebody. I'm just going to apply.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So continuing along the thread of you joined the pirate company, pardon the pun, got thrown in the deep end, with the guy who disappeared. What was then the next step in your journey?
Well, the curious thing then was this particular company, unfortunately, had a bit of a challenge, and one of them ruined the company, basically. So I was then kind of, having thought I was going to work with them and, so be presented with work, I was then thinking, okay, so I've now left the job I had. I've become self-employed, but I was going to work for these people. So actually now I'm just going to have to find some work on my own. Fortunately, at that point I met Anne Grindrod, who you know, and another lady called Helen McKinley. I don't know if you know Helen or not.
Yeah.
So we decided, we kind of partnered up together and said, well, let's work together and share what we have together and collaborate and kind of, if any of us get some work, then we'll share it with each other, which is what we did. And we did that for, in an informal, we didn't ever create a company. We were all separate, but we did it on an informal basis for actually probably 7 or 8 years. And worked together really closely on a number of projects.
And so when for you, how do you know, and I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot here because it's not in the questions that we put in there in the brief, but how do you, or did you, or have you turned a curiosity into a passion? Because I see exactly what you're passionate about, and it's way stronger than curiosity.
How did I turn it into a passion? That is, well, I don't know the answer to that, Claire.
That's okay.
I think it just evolves, doesn't it? And the more you become curious about something, the more you investigate it, the more you become interested. I mean, like I said, I always had an interest in people. I've probably always had an interest in learning. I mean, most of my family were teachers, which was another thing I swore I was never going to do. But I did have an interest in learning. How do we learn, to do the things we do? How do we learn? And what's the actual, the kind, because I studied physiology at university as part of the psychology and some neuroscience, I was always really curious as to what was happening, what was really happening in people's brains when things change for them, when they feel things, when they learn, so that kind of, but what's really going on in their brains. So I guess it's just that regular, long exploration into that then it kind of takes over your life, I suppose.
And if we sort of ripple out a bit into the bigger picture, into sort of, how creating a learning culture in an organization, because, looking to the future, looking at what we're going through at the moment with the pandemic, looking at potential shortages in skills, that it's going to be critical to create learning that sticks as part of an organization and as part of an organizational culture. And of course, curiosity is part of that. So how do you see this evolving and developing from a bigger picture perspective? What is it that leaders need to sort of pay attention to create a learning culture?
I think they need to get people understand. I mean, one of the things I think is really important is to get everybody in the culture to understand learning better. I mean, I would say that, wouldn't I? But, I think if we all have to learn, even if we think, oh no, I don't like courses or I don't like training, we have to learn. Learning is a human condition, that it's impossible. If you don't learn, you get hit by a bus very young. We have to learn. It's just our evolutionary way of being. And with things like COVID, we are all learning super fast to deal with a whole pile of different things. And for some people, that's a good experience. And for some, they're having to deal with really difficult things right now. All sorts of difficult things at different levels. But we're still going to learn from it. And one of the things I think organizations can do is to support people in that learning and help them recognize the learning and give them give them more skills to how to actually learn effectively. I talked a little bit earlier on about, the fear of failure and how we can learn from failure. Now, there are techniques. They're not complex techniques, but there are steps you can do to help you learn from failure. There are steps you can take that help you learn from, the horrible things in life that we all get thrown at us. And if we could just help people learn to learn, not just the formal stuff, but from the experience and the informal stuff too, I feel that would drive a learning culture enormously, because you could have the top, that sort of promoting learning within the organization and, funding learning and recognizing that learning within an organization is the way to have a successful organization. Otherwise, you're just going to get stuck. But if we've also from the bottom up got people being curious about their own learning and understanding what learning is, then I think that makes a much stronger culture, because it's not being imposed from the top, it's coming from both ends.
I think that's a really, really important point that you make, Stella. And I know, both you and I in the facilitation work that we've done, certainly one of the challenges that I've had in the past is, say, we're running programs around, becoming more flexible to change, building resilience, etc., is that my access to that senior leadership team was always blocked in some way, where it was, we perceive that we don't need to learn that, we're already experts in change. So there was this perception that, no, that's okay, this is for everybody else. And yet, were they to become curious and role model that curiosity about their own learning, I think that could then have a ripple effect.
I totally agree there, Claire. I mean, you're right. And what I don't know, what I'm curious about is, are those leaders at the top genuinely not interested in learning, about change or whatever it might be? Or is there somebody in the middle putting that perception onto them, putting that thought onto them and kind of blocking you from getting there? Because I actually think most people at the top, how did they get there? They probably, part of how they got there, I mean, part of it, could be, they say that many leaders are psychopathic, not all, so maybe they just trampled on everybody. But even that, how you've still got to think, how do I get round this? How do I persuade this person? How do I, there's always those questions. So I would imagine, it'd be a really interesting, I'm sure somebody's probably done the study. I would imagine most leaders probably are quite curious, and that potentially sometimes the blocker is in the middle, where, people often say to me, if we're doing brain-friendly learning, when we're doing brain-friendly learning, and, maybe we talk about using, games or activities or toys. Well, that won't work for the senior management.
Yeah.
Well, why won't it work for the senior management? Senior management have got brains just the same as everybody else. And they need engagement, and they enjoy fun, and they need to feel, perhaps a little trepidation occasionally. And I'm quite sure they mostly do. They really don't want to sit and listen to somebody being boring any more than anybody else. And they don't need, they don't need formality all the time. It's good for them to get out of that kind of, I'm a senior person and I have to look senior. But it's often the people in the middle who say, "Oh no, that won't work for them." And I know it does, because we work with senior people and they love it.
That's really, really interesting food for thought. I'm gonna take that one and think about it and reflect on it. Absolutely. And so, carrying on, sort of now that we're talking about that leadership level. And you already mentioned it about that. Of course, leaders need to be curious. The curiosity in their problem solving and decision making. But where do you see curiosity as being, or why do you see curiosity as being an important trait in leadership?
Because if you're not curious and you don't therefore learn, you can't adapt to the world that's out there. And leaders need to be massively able, yes, they have to set a direction and steer, but they have to be able to recognize, there's an iceberg coming, or there's, a hole in the ground, or, what's the competition doing? Why are they, I heard today, I think Apple have just, I don't know, they've got a trillion pounds, $1 trillion or something.
Yeah.
Crazy. But, wow, how did that happen? What are they doing? So if you're a leader, you need to be looking at, what are other people doing so that you can learn from it or not do it. So I think as a leader, you're going to have to ask those questions in order to build your organization, in order to take people with you. And also, I think that curiosity about, what's happening within my own organization that we can improve, that we can build, that we can change, that we can adapt. So, they need to have like a 360-degree curiosity radar out there, because as soon as they start saying, well, I think I know the answer, the one answer or the multiple answers, then you stop learning. And once you stop learning, you can't adapt anymore.
You stagnate, don't you?
Yeah.
And I think there's probably never been a better time in history, in any of our lifetimes, to take curiosity and really wonder about what the future of work will be.
It's really interesting, Claire. I'm doing a piece of work with Novartis at the moment. So me and many others, I think it was the first time they did it last year. Novartis had a Curiosity Month, and this was about promoting a learning culture within the organization. And they're repeating it this year in September. And they have just got a whole range of different things in that month. They've got different speakers, they've got different activities, and they are really, really promoting this idea that, get curious about your work, get curious about your colleagues, get curious about, you. So they're using curiosity to absolutely drive the idea of a learning culture.
I love that idea, Curiosity Month.
Yeah.
Was that something that you suggested to them, or
no,
they came up with?
No, I was invited to chair a session at the Learning Tech conference last year, and they were talking. My speaker was talking about what they were doing at Novartis. So yes, it certainly wasn't me that instigated it. It was somebody very smart within Novartis. And do you know what? I'm curious now, because I don't know who did it. So I think whoever instigated that idea has a lot of kudos, because it's such an interesting way of rather than saying, right, we're going to promote a learning culture, we're going to have learning week. This is just Curiosity Week. Month. Yeah. It's a whole month of curiosity, and they are putting an incredible amount of effort. They've got speakers from. I mean, I'm on a session with Barbara Oakley from Coursera. She's one of the world's most famous sort of authors on Coursera. And there are lots of really, really amazing speakers that they're working with. So they're sharing it with all the entire Novartis staff, which is fairly huge, as you can imagine, and global. They're translating. I think they've got 6 translations going on at any one time, and they're changing. In the morning they're translating in kind of geography, Western Hemisphere stuff, and in the evening they're translating in Eastern Hemisphere languages. So they are really putting a massive amount of effort into this idea of let's get our people curious and learning.
Well, I mean, just listening to that, there's going to have to be a return on investment. You think about how curiosity as a cog in a wheel fosters innovation, creativity, new products, new services, new ideas. It's a real little Kickstarter, isn't it? Accelerator.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And I know creativity is one of the things that they're hoping will spin off from the curiosity. And again, it does, because you get curious about something, which then one of the things to be creative, isn't it, is to expand your horizons and to bring one idea from here and one from there and another one from over there, and then kind of merge them together and come up with a creative idea. So that if you're curious, it's almost like you've got, antennae out looking at things.
Yeah.
which then allows you to be more creative. So I think curiosity and creativity go together beautifully.
Yeah, they are. They're hand in hand. So back on our thread, Stella, because I'm in conversation with you here in Sydney, and it's just starting to get dark now, and we're winter going into spring. Where are you chatting from?
So I'm chatting from sunny, warm, and summery Belgium.
How? And I know it wasn't a direct jump from the UK to Belgium. Please just fill us in.
Okay, so about 4 years ago now, kids had grown up. Husband and I were very happy, kind of, doing our roles and things. But we were ready for another. Adventure. We've always loved Spain. Technology had got to the point where I was realizing that instead of always going to a meeting, I was having quite a lot of Skype meetings with clients and things. So we thought, well, actually, we really fancy just going abroad for a year and living abroad. We'd always wanted to go and live in Europe for a year. So we decided to move ourselves and our businesses to Spain initially for a year. And then we said, well, we'll see what happens after that. So we went for a year. And then thought, yeah, well, we're not coming back. This is great. We're really enjoying where we are. We were living in a beautiful city called Burgos in northern Spain, Spain's coldest city, so not too hot for me. So that was good. Did you? So we were settling down. We found a really nice little flat. We were just about to move to a new flat. I was working in a really nice co-working space. Everything was humming along nicely, and then I went to the Learning Tech conference again and bumped into somebody. Well, I thought I bumped into them, but it turned out they were stalking me, tracking me down, who said, we're starting a new company and we want to ask you to have a look at, we're starting a new company based on a training company, and we want you to come and sort of audit what we're doing to see whether what we're planning on doing is a good method of learning. So I said, great, that sounds like a really interesting project. So did that. This company happened to be in Belgium. So went from Spain to Belgium 3 or 4 times to work with them on looking at their methodology and kind of putting some ideas in. And it looked like a really robust methodology. The CEO, Raf Simus, turned out to be
Raf, who is on the August podcast.
Indeed. I was really inspired by Raf. He was already running a business that was a tech talent incubator, but he had this idea for this new business. And I was just really inspired by his vision, by the way he'd grown his previous business. So for years, I'd kind of been wanting to really grow my business, but never quite found anybody who had the same passion for learning. And really, I was meeting lots of people with passion for learning, but really good business skills, business growth skills. So, I was really inspired by what he was doing. I was fascinated to be part of the journey with them and was working as a consultant for them. And I was helping Raf look for somebody who could be their chief learning officer. And we were interviewing people and just nobody had quite enough of everything they needed. And then one day Raf just said, Stella, it could be you.
And we're looking at them.
Yeah. And he hadn't asked before because he knew I was really happy in Spain. So he didn't think I would move to Belgium. And while this had been going on, I had myself been thinking, wow, that's a really cool job. This job I'm interviewing people for, that looks like a really exciting job. So when he said that, I said, okay, I'm going to go back and think. And had to go home and then say to my husband, we're really enjoying living in Spain. How would you feel about moving to Belgium? There's a lot of beer.
Oh my goodness!
So fortunately, we already liked Belgium. We'd been to Belgium quite a lot. Nick had worked in Belgium a number of times before on contracts. So we knew we liked Belgium, and very coincidentally, I'd also done some other work in Belgium in Mechelen a number of times in the last couple of years. So we were kind of quite familiar with it. So we said, this is such a great opportunity. It's such an exciting project. Yes, we'll do it. We can always go back to Spain later if we want to. So we moved to Mechelen in Belgium in December. I think it was December the 31st last year.
Wow, so you didn't get too much time before you went into lockdown.
We didn't, which has been a bit of a challenge because, it's part of what I love about going to a new place is meeting new people, and that's turned out to be much harder than normal.
Of course. So what I'm hearing here is that I don't know if it's like a bit of a chicken and egg question in terms of the link between curiosity and adventure. Have you always had a sense of adventure, and do they come hand in hand? Or if you were to foster your sense, if one were to foster one's sense of curiosity, would that then give them more courage and a greater sense of adventure?
So as a child, I was very not adventurous. I was very shy. I was physically always very timid. Like I've never climbed a tree, far, far too scary. If we were on the beach, which we used to do a lot, I would always be worried about the tide coming in. So I don't think I was an adventurous child. No. I think when I went to university, that was it was the first time I'd ever lived away from home, of course. Everybody went, everybody I knew was going to university. So that kind of was a normal thing to do. And it was a bit nerve-wracking, but actually I found it was fantastic. It was really exciting and I had all these new experiences. So in a sense, it was that kind of being forced wasn't the right word. I wanted to go to university, but being forced into change that made me realize, wow, this is really good. And then I think all those other things that happened, I think when you take a slightly scary step, motherhood is one of the scariest steps you can take, but many of us do it without thinking, or parenthood. You take those steps and you begin to realize that, whoa, there's a whole world out here I hadn't realized. And actually it's often easier than you think, as long as you take the steps. You have to plan it and you have to think about it. But that sense of curiosity, I think we talked about it, overcoming the fear of the future can help you just think, well, how might it be? And, it might be really scary or it might be really fantastic. And, the reality is it's both. There's always, coming to Belgium has been fantastic. And absolutely, I'm really loving my new role. But there are some days I'm just thinking, oh my goodness, what have I done? Because there's lots of scary new things.
And I think it's Susan Jeffers who wrote Embracing Uncertainty, calls it the marvel of maybe.
Yeah.
But to refrain from labeling things. Yeah, maybe it's going to be brilliant. Maybe it's going to be a nightmare. Maybe it'll be, who knows? But let's give it a go.
And I think I'm lucky that, I'm curious, but I'm also quite an optimistic person. So whilst also being pretty good at considering the downsides, but my experience, and I am hugely lucky, my experience has been that when I've taken a risk, mostly we've made it work. And it's worked out really, really well.
Yeah. And I think that, to embrace curiosity at this moment in time, I think, it's hugely timely when this is going out to think about, well, I don't have control over this or control over that, but I can stay curious about what the future might hold. And combined with the optimism that, if we consider the metaphor of a roller coaster, well, we're probably, pardon my French, in a bloody big dip at the moment.
And,
but at some point it has to come up.
If you think about, the history of humans, a lot of, I think the humans and the world have gone through the roller coaster, as you say, many, many times. This actually, in terms of some of the things that have happened in the world, yes, it's global, and yes, everybody knows about it. And I think part of that is, the reach of global has made the disease spread, but also the reach of social media has meant everybody knows about it. I'm sure in the past there would have been, pockets of people who they wouldn't have heard about it and it wouldn't have bothered them.
Yeah.
But now everybody knows about it. So, the some people always believe we're at a special place in history. And I actually am not entirely sure about that. I just wonder if we're just in a different place in history. Because at every stage, everybody's thought it was special. Because for you, it is special because it's the only time you've ever had that. And for the people around you. But actually over history, there's a program on Radio 4 called The Long View, I think. And they always compare, a current event with something from the past. And, how often there are really strong similarities and people get through it. So, I think we can be curious about what is this new world going to bring? And it's going to bring some real challenges. It has already brought some huge challenges, but it is going to bring some good things with it.
Yeah, there will be some huge opportunities. And we're just coming to the top of our time now. And there's normally a question that I ask towards the end of the podcast. But before I do ask that question, what I've felt that this last 15 minutes has been is you've almost been like an ambassador for curiosity. That I'm bought in. I mean, I'm naturally curious anyway, but I think if I was listening to this, it's made me realize the role that curiosity has in shaping our attitude to work, our attitude to life, our attitude to risk. So thank you for that. And I don't know if there is any more to say, but I'm going to ask the question anyway, because it's a question I always ask everybody. Is that, if there were one key message to share around curiosity and curiosity in leadership or curiosity in the situation that we're in today, that you would like to leave our listeners with and get them thinking, what might that be, Stella?
I think it's probably when something, you see something in the future or you're planning the future, it's just to step back, and rather than perhaps react to things, it's maybe just to step back or to reflect. And it could be after you've done something and just say, I wonder why that was different. Or I think I wonder is a useful kind of phrase. I wonder how, I wonder why, I wonder when. So maybe I wonder is just preface your thoughts with I wonder.
The wonder of wonder. The marvel of maybe and the wonder of wonder. Fabulous. Thank you so much. I could go on and on and on, but I know you've got another meeting coming up, and it's probably wine o'clock for me anyway. Stella, would it be okay if I put details of your book and connection to LinkedIn and details of Stella Labs on the show notes?
That would be absolutely perfect. Thank you very much.
Wonderful.
You can put my Twitter handle on there too, if you like.
Oh, yes, you're a great tweeter. You really are.
I'm doing less tweeting at the moment than I have done in the past, but I still like Twitter.
Good. Well, I'm curious about the rest of your day. I hope it's fabulous, and I'm going to enjoy a wonderful evening in our wonderfully simplified life. Which is great. Stella, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. It was really, really lovely to catch up with you again.
As always, go well. Stay safe.